Imagine, like, a fossil so incredibly valuable that it was actually traded for a single cow.
Or one that was hidden away under a grumpy quarry owner's bed, just,
Yeah.
out of spite.
Right. And add to that a century-long scientific culture war.
Mhm.
Oh, and the fact that the single famous feather that actually gave this creature its name, well, it might actually belong to a completely different animal.
Yeah, it is a wild story.
Welcome, learner, to this deep dive. Today, our mission is to look way past those neat, sanitized textbook illustrations you've probably seen. We're uncovering the wild, really complex reality of the most famous fossil in the world, the Archaeopteryx, the ancient wing.
It's the fossil that basically forced the scientific community to confront the messy reality of evolution. I mean, we love to categorize nature into neat little boxes, right?
Yeah.
Reptiles in one, birds in another.
But Archaeopteryx is just the ultimate rule breaker. It sits right on that phylogenetic razor's edge.
Exactly.
So we're going to explore its role as Exhibit A for evolution, the downright absurd human drama surrounding its discovery, and those fierce debates over how it actually lived.
Plus, we'll get into how cutting-edge technology in 2025, 2026 is completely rewriting what we thought we knew.
Yeah, I like to think of Archaeopteryx as the Rosetta Stone of paleontology. It's like the single key that unlocked the translation between the really fearsome, ground-dwelling theropod dinosaurs of the Jurassic and the birds that are just sitting outside your window right now.
But to even have that Rosetta Stone, we have to talk about a staggering geological miracle. I mean, we know an astonishing amount of detail about a creature that lived 150 million years ago.
Which is mind-blowing in itself.
It really is. And that level of data is entirely due to the uniquely deadly environment that preserved it. So picture late Jurassic southern Germany, but erase the Bavarian Alps from your mind completely.
Okay, no mountains. What are we looking at instead?
You're looking at a dry, tropical archipelago of small islands. They're set in this shallow, warm sea, roughly at the same latitude as modern-day Florida.
Oh, wow. Okay, quite the vacation spot.
Well, sort of. Nestled within those island reefs were the Solnhofen limestone lagoons. The surface waters were totally normal, teeming with small fish, marine reptiles, that sort of thing.
Right, the usual Jurassic suspects.
But the bottoms of these lagoons were what toponimists like to call jacuzzis of despair.
Jacuzzis of despair. That sounds terrifying.
It was. The water was strongly stratified. So dense hypersaline water sank to the bottom, creating this stagnant anoxic layer, meaning there was absolutely zero oxygen down there.
Ah, got it. So anything that goes down stays down.
Exactly. That lack of oxygen is the critical mechanism for preservation. If an animal washed into the lagoon and sank into that hypersaline brine, it died almost immediately.
But wait, that doesn't make total sense to me just yet. If Archaeopteryx was a bird or, lived up in the trees, what was it doing dying in the middle of a toxic marine lagoon in the first place? Does this mean it was flying out over open water?
That's a great question. The sheer number of specimens we've found in these marine sediments heavily suggests that, yeah, they were traversing open water between the islands of the archipelago.
Oh, so they weren't just fluttering around a closed forest canopy.
Right. And sometimes they just didn't make the distance. They exhausted themselves and fell into the sea. And once they sank into that toxic brine, well, the magic happened.
Because there were no scavengers, right?
Precisely. The toxic conditions meant no bottom-feeding fish, no snails, no worms to tear the fragile skeleton apart or scatter the bones. The carcass would just rest on the soft carbonate mud, completely undisturbed.
And then the bacteria take over.
Yes, thick mats of cyanobacteria would begin to colonize the carcass.
So these bacteria are feeding on the decaying organic matter, and as they do, they're essentially shrink-wrapping the body. Like, they create this microbial shroud that holds every delicate structure perfectly in place.
Even the individual microscopic barbs of the feathers.
That is wild. And then the fine-grained carbonate sediment just gently buries it?
Yeah, the chemistry of that bacterial action is what makes the Solnhofen fossils world-renowned. The bacteria actually alter the microchemistry of the sediment immediately surrounding the feathers.
Triggering the minerals to basically replicate the soft tissue in stone.
Exactly. That is why we don't just have crushed bones. We have these flawless, high-resolution impressions of plumage that hasn't existed for 150 million years.
But the crazy thing is, the very reason these fossils were so perfectly preserved, that impossibly fine-grained limestone, is exactly what triggered their totally chaotic discovery.
Oh, absolutely. The human drama here is unparalleled.
Because in the 1800s, that specific Solnhofen stone became the gold standard for lithographic printing. So the industrial demand to quarry this rock is what accidentally thrust these priceless evolutionary treasures into a really bizarre global market.
And the timing. It was like a match thrown into a powder keg. The first trace of Archaeopteryx, which was just a solitary, beautifully preserved feather, was unearthed and described in 1861.
Which is what, just 2 years after Charles Darwin published On the Origin of Species?
Exactly 2 years later. And critics of evolution were loudly demanding proof of transitional forms at the time. They kept pointing out that the fossil record was full of gaps.
And then, seemingly out of nowhere, this Bavarian quarry delivers a creature that is literally half reptile and half bird.
Darwin was thrilled.
Yeah.
He actually added it to the later editions of his book, calling it a strange bird with a long lizard-like tail. It was the ultimate vindication of his theory.
You would think a discovery of that magnitude would be carefully extracted by, I don't know, a team of university scientists in white coats. But the reality was just absolute chaos.
Complete chaos. The economics of the 14 known specimens are just staggering. Take the first skeletal specimen, known as the London specimen. It was given to a local doctor named Carl Haberlein as payment for medical services.
Like, here's a dinosaur instead of cash.
Basically. And Haberlein then turned around and sold it to the Natural History Museum in London for £450, which was an exorbitant sum at the time.
Historical records suggest he actually used the money to pay for his daughter's dowry.
Yep. And it gets wilder. The Berlin specimen, which is arguably the most famous and beautiful fossil in the world, the one you always see in textbooks with its wings spread out like an angel, that one was allegedly exchanged for a single cow.
A cow? For a priceless missing link?
I know. And another one, the Munich specimen, was found completely shattered. A local quarryman painstakingly pieced it back together from 450 separate fragments.
Oh, wow. I bet he got a huge payout for that.
Nope. His reward for saving one of the most important fossils on Earth was literally just a polite thank you. Meanwhile, the quarry owner sold it for 2 million Deutschmarks.
That is heartbreaking. But I guess the survival of these specimens was entirely arbitrary. Like the most tragic example, the Maxberg specimen.
Well, Edward Opitch.
Yeah.
He was an eccentric, notoriously bad-tempered quarry owner.
Yeah, he shopped it around trying to get this massive payout, right? And when institutions refused to meet his price, he just took the fossil home and hid it under his bed out of spite.
He really did. And the worst part is, when Opitch died in 1991, investigators went to check his house. The fossil was gone.
To this day, it is completely lost to science. It just vanished into the black market, or maybe it's in someone's private living room.
It's tragic. But, the human folly doesn't end with greed. It extends to outright denial, too.
Oh, you mean the 1980s forgery claims?
Yes. A prominent astronomer named Fred Hoyle, who, to be absolutely clear, had zero background in paleontology or geology, launched this highly publicized campaign claiming the London and Berlin specimens were modern forgeries.
Right, he essentially argued that some 19th century prankster took a regular small dinosaur skeleton and just pressed modern bird feathers into a thin layer of cement. It's like looking at a perfectly preserved Roman mosaic and assuming it must be a modern fake just because it's too beautiful.
That's a perfect analogy. Hoyle's fundamental mistake was failing to understand lithification, which is the chemical process of how rock actually forms.
So how did scientists definitively prove the feathers weren't just stamped on?
Well, Hoyle looked at photographs, noticed a slight difference in the surface texture where the feathers were, and just assumed it had to be added cement. But the scientists at the Natural History Museum had to meticulously explain the taphonomy we discussed earlier.
Right, the cyanobacteria.
Exactly. As the bacteria fed on the organic material of the feathers, they chemically altered the limestone right at the boundary layer. So that textural difference isn't cement. It's the 150-million-year-old chemical signature of the rotting feather itself.
You can't exactly fake a localized microscopic chemical reaction.
No, you can't. Plus, the museum showed that the rock slabs have these matching dendrites, which are intricate branching manganese crystals that grew naturally through the stone and continuously across the feather impressions.
Oh, so if someone had stamped feathers into wet cement, those ancient crystal networks would have been completely obliterated?
Exactly. The evidence of their authenticity is just irrefutable. And the reason these authentic, cow-traded dowry-funding fossils were worth fighting over is because of what their anatomy actually reveals.
Right, so let's get into what this animal actually looked like.
Archaeopteryx was roughly the size of a modern magpie, maybe scaling up to a raven for the largest specimens. It probably weighed around a kilogram. And its skeleton is basically the textbook definition of a mosaic.
It really is a Frankenstein's monster of evolutionary traits, because if you look at the non-avian dinosaur chassis, you've got this long, rigid tail made of up to 23 bony vertebrae.
And jaws lined with sharp, peg-like teeth instead of a keratinous beak.
Right. And extending from the wings, you have three distinct, highly mobile fingers, each armed with a sharp, curved claw. If you strip away the feathers, the skeleton looks astonishingly similar to small predatory theropod dinosaurs, like a Deinonychus or a velociraptor.
But then, layered seamlessly onto that reptilian framework, are these unmistakable avian features. It possesses a furcula, or withbone, which in modern birds acts as a spring to store and release energy during flight.
And most importantly, it has highly developed asymmetrical flight feathers.
Yes, the asymmetry is crucial. The leading edge of the feather is narrow and stiff, while the trailing edge is wide and flexible. This creates an airfoil, which is the exact aerodynamic shape required to generate lift.
And that very specific mosaic anatomy is exactly what makes it a lightning rod for modern cultural debates.
Unfortunately, yes.
Like some creationist groups have attempted to, quote, mine paleontologists to argue that Archaeopteryx isn't a missing link at all. They frequently cite the late Alan Turing, who is a prominent paleontologist and author of A New Look at Dinosaurs.
Right, and they take his words completely out of context to claim he admitted the 21 reptilian traits of the fossil had been debunked, or that he said it was just a regular bird.
But when you actually review Turing's source material, his argument was the exact opposite, right?
Completely the opposite. He exhaustively detailed those 21 reptilian traits precisely to prove it was a transitional form. His whole point was that Archaeopteryx could not be dismissed as a standard bird because its skeletal architecture was still overwhelmingly dinosaurian.
And just to be clear, we bring this up not to take sides in any culture war, but just to impartially report on what the original scientific literature actually says. It's so important to go to the source.
Absolutely. But, human bias has always warped how we view this animal. Even the scientists back then struggled with it.
Oh, you mean the feathered trousers?
Yes. When the Berlin specimen was first prepped in the 19th century, it actually had long feathers covering its legs. Paleontologists call them feathered trousers. But the early preparators literally scraped them off the rock.
Wait, they just destroyed part of the fossil. Why?
They didn't realize they were feathers. They just couldn't conceive of a bird with heavy plumage all the way down its legs. So they altered the fossil to fit their preconceived notion of what a bird should look like.
That's wild. And it brings up a really interesting taxonomic dilemma. If it has teeth, claws, and a bony theropod tail, why did early scientists immediately classify it as the first bird, rather than just calling it a feathered dinosaur? Where is the actual line drawn?
Well, at the time, flight feathers were the ultimate diagnostic feature. If it had feathers, it went in the bird box. But today, we know that many non-flying theropod dinosaurs were covered in complex feathers.
So the line is getting pretty blurry.
Very blurry. Some modern phylogenetic analyses place Archaeopteryx at the very base of Avielae, the bird family tree. Others push it just outside that boundary, classifying it as a highly derived Deinonychosaur. It basically thrives in the gray area of categorization.
Which naturally leads us to the most hotly debated question in its entire history, the Great Flight Debate.
Oh yes, pheasants versus gliders.
Right, because having aerodynamic feathers is one thing, but did this Frankenstein creature actually possess the biomechanics to fly?
For over a century, paleontologists were completely split into two camps. Was it a glider that climbed trees using its wing claws and parachuted down? Or was it a ground-dwelling runner that frantically flapped its wings to leap up and catch insects?
And we didn't really get a breakthrough until 2018, right? Using a technique called phase contrast synchrotron microtomography.
Try saying that 3 times fast.
I'd rather not. But basically, instead of risking damage by cracking these priceless fossils open, scientists took 3 Archaeopteryx specimens to a massive particle accelerator in France.
Yeah, they fired high-energy X-rays to get virtual 3D slices of the internal bone structure. Specifically, they were measuring the cross-sectional geometry, the cortical thickness of the bone walls, and the torsional resistance.
They basically wanted to know exactly how much sheer twisting force those fragile wing bones could handle before snapping under aerodynamic load.
Exactly. And the internal geometry provided a definitive answer. The bone architecture consistently matched that of modern birds capable of active, powered flight.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the thick cortical walls of the humerus proved it wasn't just passively gliding. It possessed the structural integrity and the metabolic capacity to actively flap and generate sustained lift.
But to be clear, we aren't talking about the soaring, majestic flight of an eagle here, right?
Not at all. The data showed its bone structure aligns closest to modern burst flyers or short flyers.
Like pheasants or turkeys.
Exactly. Heavy, somewhat clumsy birds that use explosive bursts of energy to get airborne over short distances.
And the clumsiness is a product of its transitional shoulder joint, right? Like modern birds have this highly specialized pulley system, a trioceal canal formed by the intersection of the coracoid, scapula, and furcula.
Right. A tendon passes through this hole, which allows a muscle on the bird's chest to physically lift the wing up over its back during the recovery phase of a flight stroke. But Archaeopteryx completely lacked this pulley system.
So because of its skeletal limits, it physically could not lift its wings high over its body.
Exactly.
So how did it actually fly? I keep imagining like a turkey trying to do a frantic butterfly stroke in the air.
That is basically it. Because it couldn't lift its wings up, it had to use an anterodorsal posteroventral flight stroke.
Okay, English translation, please.
It's essentially a forward and downward grabbing motion. And biomechanically, that forward and downward stroke is virtually identical to the motion predatory theropod dinosaurs used to reach out and grab prey.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Archaeopteryx simply repurposed the ancestral hunting motion of its dinosaur relatives into a crude, energy-intensive flight stroke. It used the exact same muscle memory to grab the air instead of a lizard.
That is fascinating. But that answers the physics. What about its daily life? If it was such a clumsy burst flyer, how did it hunt? Was it swooping down on baby dinosaurs or just running along the beach?
Given its large eye sockets and sclerotic rings, which strongly suggest it had excellent low-light vision, it was almost certainly an active ambush predator. It likely sprinted along the beaches or the underbrush, using short bursts of flight to ambush small mammals, lizards, or even baby dinosaurs like Compsognathus before just dropping back to the ground.
That image of an agile, ground-foraging predator is actually being heavily reinforced by the absolute latest research, because the narrative of Archaeopteryx is not locked in the 19th or 20th century.
Not at all.
Brand new technology and newly prepped fossils from 2024 to 2026 are forcing us to rewrite the textbooks all over again, specifically regarding the 14th specimen.
Ah, the Chicago Archaeopteryx.
Yes. The Field Museum acquired this incredibly significant fossil, and the initial scientific descriptions from 2025 and 2026 are just mind-blowing.
It is the smallest known specimen, about the size of a pigeon, but the preservation is nearly three-dimensional. And the high-resolution CT scans revealed a transitional palate, the roof of the mouth.
Which is huge, right?
It's massive.
Yeah.
It perfectly captures cranial kinesis in evolution. So it's the halfway point between the heavy fused skulls of reptiles and the lightweight, flexible skulls of modern birds, where the upper beak can actually move independently.
And the soft tissue findings on the Chicago specimen are pretty groundbreaking, too. It reveals textured toe pads that are structurally similar to modern ground-foraging birds, so that confirms its comfort on the ground. But the crowning aerodynamic discovery is the first ever concrete evidence of tertial feathers on an Archaeopteryx.
Yes, tertial feathers are the missing link of the wing. These are the innermost flight feathers that bridge the gap between the elbow and the body.
Because without them, air just slips through that gap, creating massive drag.
Exactly. Finding tertials means Archaeopteryx had a continuous aerodynamic surface. It proves the animal had taken a much larger evolutionary step toward efficient-powered flight than we previously thought.
And technology is revealing not just how it flew, but what it looked like while flying. Using scanning electron microscopy, researchers analyzed fossilized melanosomes.
Right, the microscopic pigment-producing structures within the feathers. By measuring the shape and density of these melanosomes and comparing them to a database of modern bird species, they concluded with 95% certainty that the original feathers were matte black.
So Archaeopteryx likely looked like a black raven or a magpie. But the black pigment isn't just a color, right? It's acting like a structural feature.
Yes, melanin physically thickens and strengthens the keratin matrix of the feather. The dark coloration acted like carbon fiber reinforcement. It stiffened the primary feathers to help them survive the intense physical stress and abrasion of that frantic butterfly stroke flight.
So the black pigment is basically reinforcing a fragile wing. That is such a stunning intersection of biology, physics, and chemistry.
It really is. But in paleontology, every technological leap brings a new, humbling complication. And that brings us to the ultimate ironic twist regarding the very first discovery from 1861.
You mean the single isolated feather that started the entire revolution? The holotype.
The very one. the literal feather that was used to formally define and name the species Archaeopteryx lithographica.
Okay, what did we find out?
Well, recent laser-stimulated fluorescence imaging allows us to see trace mineral outlines that are completely invisible under normal light. When scientists scanned that famous 1861 feather, they revealed the hidden internal geometry of the quill. And the structure of that quill, specifically the curvature and the length of the calamus, is entirely inconsistent with the body and flight feathers found on the 14 actual Archaeopteryx
No,
skeletons.
wait, really?
Yeah.
So the single feather that gave the most famous fossil in the world its name likely doesn't even belong to an Archaeopteryx.
It doesn't. It likely belongs to an entirely unknown, unidentified species of feathered dinosaur that was sharing those same tropical islands 150 million years ago.
That is just, what does that mean for taxonomy, if the name-bearing fossil belongs to something else entirely?
It is a profound taxonomic headache. The International Commission on Zoological Nomenclature actually had to step in and officially designate the London skeletal specimen as the neotype, the new name-bearing standard, just to protect the name Archaeopteryx.
Because if they hadn't, the rules of taxonomy might have forced us to rename all 14 skeletons.
Exactly. It's basically a bureaucratic band-aid holding paleontology's greatest story together.
Wow. Let's just take a step back and look at the sheer scale of what we've covered today. From toxic, hypersaline jacuzzis in the Jurassic to 19th century dowries and cows to modern particle accelerators and electron microscopes.
It's an incredible arc.
It really is. Archaeopteryx is a creature that perfectly bridges the anatomical gap between ground-dwelling theropods and the birds in our backyards. It survived marine death traps, it survived creationist, quote, mining, and it survived centuries of human blundering, all to teach us exactly how the biomechanics of flight evolved.
It serves as the ultimate testament to the messy, non-linear reality of evolution. Archaeopteryx wasn't trying to become a modern bird. It was simply a dinosaur doing its best to survive as an ambush predator in a harsh island ecosystem. And in doing so, it inadvertently stumbled upon the biological blueprint for conquering the skies.
Beautifully said. But as we wrap up, I want to leave you, the learner, with one final lingering thought. We know of 14 specimens, but remember Edward Opich, the eccentric quarry owner who hid the spectacular Maxburg specimen under his bed.
Ah, yes. When he died, it vanished without a trace, entirely lost to science.
Exactly. It forces us to confront a haunting reality about paleontology. How many other priceless missing links are out there right now?
How many world-changing fossils creatures that could fundamentally rewrite our understanding of life on Earth are currently sitting in a private collector's living room, locked away from researchers?
What other impossible secrets of evolution are being used as coffee table decorations right now? It's enough to keep any science lover awake at night. But until those lost treasures resurface, we will keep applying new technology to the wonders we do have. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We hope it gave you a few new aha moments to share. Stay insanely curious, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.